guess could you look in the live stream voice text that the meme I just made? That's up a little ways. The robot with the neighbor sign. Is that what it looked like when you came in? And, um,
Uh,
like this is a good example because basically it's like your wife's telling you this is the neighbor, this is the sex robot. Like it doesn't look anything like your neighbor. And she was banging the neighbor. She comes in with this thing and says, "This is what I was having sex with," and doesn't look anything like the neighbor. And you're like, "Okay, I'm going to believe that that was the thing I saw, having sex with you instead of the neighbor, because you believe it. I'm going to believe it." That's the kind. That's what we're dealing with. And if that's acceptable to you, that's your choice. But you realize how ridiculous that is.
yeah.
How about planes landing on moving runways? Have you had that one given to you yet? I'd love to
No,
hear other
I haven't.
robot guys. I'll try to make it quick, but so if the plane can fly against the spin of the Earth, right?
Yeah.
Then how does it land on a moving runway?
What do you mean with a moving runway?
Well, if the plane is flying separately in a separate reference frame from the spinning ball Earth, and the surface of the Earth is spinning separately from the plane, do you think that the plane has to time the landing so that it hits the runway that's spinning towards him?
No, because here you have something called the relativity,
It doesn't
which
answer
is
it. It doesn't work for you though.
well, it does because you're in the
No, it
same
doesn't.
because you're relative to the ground.
Doesn't matter.
You only have an
If you can
additional
fly against the
speed.
spin of the Earth, it doesn't matter if it's yeah, everything's relative.
This,
I'll give you that, but it doesn't solve your problem because say the plane's flying at 200 miles per hour. We had this scenario last night with Matthew Learns, and he even admitted, yeah. So if it's going at 200 miles per hour as it lands, then it's going to overtake the spin if it's flying eastward, right? Say it's going at a south-southeast runway that it's trying to hit. So that runway is spinning sideways toward the plane, right? In an eastwardly direction at 800 miles per hour, let's say at that latitude. Well, if your theory about the conservation of momentum somehow would actually work, where the plane is within the reference frame but not within the reference frame, and it's spinning with the Earth, but it would be going 600 miles per hour backwards, yet 200 miles per hour forwards, so it could actually go somewhere, right? But then there's still a 200 mile per hour difference between the plane and the spinning surface. There's no way it would be able to land, and it would treat a landing, not that it could land, but if it could land, then you have to figure out, okay, if it's landing with the spin or against the spin, there'd be a big difference, right?
no, like when you drive your car, do
No,
you
it
have
doesn't
to
work. I know the scenario. But go ahead. I want to hear you.
when you drive your car, do you have to how can you drive over the moving um, road?
The road's
it's
not
different,
moving.
right? It's different. When you're in a separate reference frame, when you're in the air and you're flying against the spin of the Earth, it's not the same as being on the Earth. It's not.
But the thing is, it is the exact same thing.
It's not. If you don't get this, you fail the logic test.
Well, that's the thing. It is the exact same thing. It's like when you're on a train,
Does a
you
car
feel
ever
like as
drive-
if you aren't moving.
Does a car ever drive against the spin of the Earth to land on the Earth on a surface that's spinning separately from the car?
It's the same, like it's moving
No, it's
against
on
the
the Earth.
rotation at this
It's
exact
on the
same way
Earth,
as the
it
plane.
Doesn't
Like just because
doesn't
it's in
work.
the air doesn't
Wait, hold on,
change.
wait. Are you really convinced of that, or do you want to hear the other side of it?
No, I am actually convinced.
Let me ask you this. Well, you're convinced, but you haven't even heard me out. How can you be convinced before you even hear me out?
Okay,
It's like
I'm
you
convinced right
decided this is
now,
the
but like
answer.
if you say something that changes my my view, then I
Kind of
will
like the
stop being
sextant,
convinced.
Yeah, if kind of like
Yeah.
with the sextant, like if you research this and you find out actually there's no way for the pilot to be able to time the landing and figure out the latitude that he's at and the angle of the runway with the spin of the Earth being in a separate reference frame, and making up. There's no way, right? If you found that out, would that be something that would? I mean, if a plane can't land on a spinning surface, and it never has to account for it, by the way, and all the flight manuals tell them to treat the Earth as if it were stationary, which if it weren't would be impossible, and all the flight simulators assume a stationary level plane. So why would they train a pilot like that and put him in the air with a totally different situation? The leading proponents on your side have to agree that the Earth spins separately, and there would be an account. Matthew Learns was on here last night, and he was able to say, okay, well, that would be 200 miles per hour difference that the runway would be spinning towards it. But that's not even what the pilots are trained to deal with. That is the scenario the globe model proposes. But the pilots would have to know that, and they're never trained to treat the Earth any differently than a stationary plane, which proves that it has to be a stationary plane, or we'd be crashing planes all the time. It's the safest way to travel, you know.
Yeah, what I'm. Yeah, that's actually a good question. But
Yeah, it's a conversation ender. If you look into it, now you can Google it, and you'll find all kinds of contradictions in the
yeah,
explanation.
but
Overtaking the spin, if you're going eastward, westward. I mean, there's all kinds of. I can't even believe that this isn't more obvious to more people.
What I mean is that the rotationary speed of a plane that then isn't moving is the same rotationary speed as the ground below. Like if it doesn't have its like thrusters on.
Even if I give you that, I'll give you that, but it's not. It wouldn't be, because your conservation of momentum isn't like a permanent magnet that lasts forever. You can say, like, if you jumped off of something,
Yeah.
you might be going the speed of the bus that you jumped off of for a little while. But that doesn't mean you can start flying in the air backwards and somehow you're still going the speed of the bus that you just jumped off of, and you have to subtract the speed of the bus forever, no matter where you go for however long. Do you understand why that doesn't make sense? Conservation of momentum argument.
No, like.
But even if I give you that, let's. I want to hear you walk through the scenario. Even if I give you that.
So the air, like, just think of the atmosphere. The atmosphere then moves relative to us. It feels like it isn't moving. It is stationary relative to us. It has the speed relative to us is 0. The speed.
Okay.
4.
Right. I'll give you that. that. Now explain how the plane lands on a spinning ball.
And if your scenario was true,
at an angle,
was that it has to go against the spin, then that means that the air molecules in the at the higher up in the atmosphere has to then not move at the same rotationary speed as the air molecules down here on solid ground. But we know, like, if you would build a pole just like high up in the air up there isn't moving past. It's stationary relative to the pole. Sure, you have winds and stuff, but regardless of the winds, you do not have a constant speed against.
I feel like you're still missing the. Can I just really quickly
deal with the plane and the surface? Just deal with the plane and the surface. I don't want to hear anything about the
and
air.
And the plane
how it's
in there.
Speed of the Earth or any of that. Yeah, but it goes against that too.
No, the thing is, it doesn't.
It does.
It has the same.
It would never be able to go eastward. The plane would never be able to travel eastward if it couldn't get out of that reference frame.
Can I just really quickly point something out? It's basically because it's a contradiction, right? Because either you can say that it's moving with the reference frame, or you can say that it's moving separately from the reference frame, but you can't say it's doing both at the same time, right? That's a problem.
Well, you can look at different reference frames. This is something we do all the time in physics.
Okay, so do you see what I posted in the live stream? That little GIF there? Which would basically what you can observe, right? You see the Earth, that's your reference frame, and then you have the air moving in two different directions. What are the reference frames there?
Wait, is it the one with the? Does the air move with the rotation of the Earth?
No, it's above that where you can see the clouds moving in two different directions. Yeah.
I also
Yeah,
posted
and
one
that's
just now.
that's like my whole point, that the only movement we can observe is then the winds, because relative to the us, if we then remove the winds, the air is then stationary.
According to
Because you do not
it's kinda
have
like
a
the Earth.
relative speed.
Kind of like the Earth
According
seems that way. Yeah.
according to Einstein, there is no optical way of measuring the spin of the Earth.
But deal with how the plane lands. If the plane flies against the spin of the surface of the Earth, that means it flies against the spin,
Mm.
and it never has to account for the spin when it lands.
No, because
It has
you
to have
only
very
look at
small wheels.
no, because the thing is, you look at the relative speed to the ground, and you see that the
Sure.
plane is moving 1 kilometer per hour faster than the ground, very slowly over it, and then trying to land. You don't have
Right.
to.
But then,
You don't have to even.
but then you're assuming that the ground is stationary, and it's not.
Yep.
Right.
No, it's not. But the plane at the same time has the same rotationary speed as the ground has, so therefore they cancel out, and you don't
Wrong.
have to.
Well, because you're flying against the spin, bro.
But that makes zero sense.
Yeah,
You
can't say
sometimes
it's-
flying against the wind.
Yeah, just because it's relative, because you could say relative to the Earth, the plane is in the some kind of force field gravity pull where it never can escape that gravity pull, and it's always going to stay with the Earth as if the Earth were stationary relative to the plane. But then the plane would never be able to fly anywhere, bro. It has to fly against the spin to go the opposite direction of the spin.
Yeah, that's the whole problem. Pagus, the whole entire thing falls apart when you bring a physical, actual moving in the air separate from Earth.
Yes.
And then you have to come back in contact again. You have a big problem because you can't show us where anything you're saying is being used in the technology to land aircraft. Their landing gear itself would be affected. It would have to be engineered into it.
Not to mention on the spherical model, right? That would mean that Egypt is traveling faster than Alaska is.
Yeah.
Do you see the GIF that I posted in the live stream with the arrow, with the spin of the Earth, right? And then the plane comes in at an angle, and it would have to actually time it, just like Coriolis effect would tell us that bullets have to be aiming at something that's not actually there to hit the target. You know about the Coriolis effect that they say.
Coriolis effect only happens over extremely large distances. It doesn't work
It
on
doesn't
your
happen.
toilet.
It
only
no, stop.
But
You
even if
stop.
it did,
Hold
plane
on.
would have to.
Or
You
like
can demonstrate Coriolis on a merry-go-round. You don't need large distances.
Yeah, but I thought you were talking about the speed of the Earth, like the rotation of the Earth. That Coriolis effect caused by the rotation of the Earth.
Because it doesn't exist, dipshit. Have you ever shot a rifle?
Let me ask you a question. Does a plane travel long distances?
Yeah.
Well, then it would have to deal with the Coriolis effect, wouldn't it?
Pagus, wouldn't it?
You do?
Okay,
Yeah.
show us where that's being done then.
So the reason that they say the Coriolis effect is so minuscule is because the bullet wouldn't travel very far, right?
No, let's not move past this. He needs to show us. Let's not move past it. He needs to show us where they are doing what he's saying now. Now you need to provide that.
I don't have a
Oh shit! There you are again, Pagus. You know, I'm going to let you slide because you are very well mannered, and so that's fine. I appreciate the conversation here.
Let me ask you this: are there sex robots guiding the plane to land on the moving surface?
Well, that's the thing.
Hold on,
We could never know, right?
Let's not get off into the weeds. I want to talk about this further, Coriolis. So would you agree to this, Pagus? If you have a ball and you're at the equator, that would be the fastest moving area on the surface, right? If it's a spinning ball.
if you look at the not like relative to the
No,
ground.
not if you look. Wait. I'm going to stop you because not if we look at. No, if you're actually measuring its speed
Then you wouldn't measure anything
of
differently because you're
rotation. Oh, shit. Just let me get to the point. Okay,
Sorry.
so you have a circumference of something at, let's say it's 24,901, right? Miles. Whatever. It could be anything. It could be inches for this exercise. So whatever it is, if you go higher upward from that largest bulge equatorial section, if you go into a smaller section, would that be a smaller circle?
yeah, it would.
Okay. And at the same amount of rotation, which would be moving faster, the equatorial point or the one higher up on the smaller circle?
The equatorial, it moves a greater amount of distance over a shorter amount of, or over the same amount of time.
So there's a difference in velocity if you went anywhere further from that area.
Yeah.
At a degree of ratio, because if you went at an angle, you're on a spinning ball, you went to some sort of angle, not straight north, let's say slightly to the right, or north. So at any given angle. So what I'm getting to the point is there's a speed differential. So can you tell me how the planes are adjusting for the speed differential if they're moving to different latitudes?
Like as I said before, I don't have any charts of how the airplanes move in front, but
you're claiming Coriolis. It's a different
but
speed.
then the Coriolis
At every latitude, it's a different speed. So I'm asking you, can you show me how they're adjusting for this difference in speed?
No.
Wouldn't they have to?
Like, yeah, they should have to, and I do believe that
They should have to, right?
they
They would
if you move-
necessarily have to. You're going across the speed of the spin of the Earth at an angle from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. You'd be dealing with all kinds of different speeds, right? Which would totally fuck up the whole travel thing to begin with, like where you're going to end up if you're traveling in a straight line. And this ball is spinning independently of the plane. That is fucked up to begin with. But how does it land is the problem, bro. The biggest problem.
Like the Coriolis effect would only be observed as an acceleration.
That's
Doesn't matter what. Yeah, acceleration. How does it land on an accelerating ball?
Then you just decelerate your plane, and then relative to the ground, you're
what
then
about
not
the
moving.
difference in vector, though? What about the vector difference?
Can you be a bit more specific?
Yeah, if you're going in a different direction, it's any oblique angle, then other than going exactly in alignment with rotation or against alignment of rotation, a different angle than that. How do you adjust for that?
If I tried, as I tried to say earlier, the rotation, you can ignore the rotation of the Earth because you're looking at the speed of the airplane, and all the measurements are made from a relative point of view from. You're made from a relative point of view from the ground, which means that you're not to the ground. You're not moving. Or then you only have this additional force.
That's false.
Fly against spin, then you realize that, right? So it's 800 miles one direction spin, right? Now, even if you say that it's traveling with that, it's going to have to overtake that to go 200 miles per hour in the opposite direction, and you could still say, okay, well, let's subtract 600 from the 800. And then it's only going 200 miles relative to the Earth, but still, it's separate from the spin of the Earth.
Like, here we have again the thing. Here you have to look at what reference frame are you looking at. In this case, just as you said, like, you could look from outside reference frame, from like outside the Earth. Then you would have you subtract then 200, and you get 600, and then you would still. You personally would observe a movement of 200 meters per second.
So when would you be outside of the reference frame of the Earth?
You wouldn't. Like the reference frame.
So you're talking about something that can even happen?
Because Earth is the center. Absolutely right.
No, like
It doesn't
That
work
means
in
you're
any
talking
way you
about
try to
something that
explain it.
can't even happen. So why are you talking about it?
Well, okay, does it make sense for them to train pilots to treat the Earth as stationary if it's not stationary? Let me ask you that.
yeah,
It does.
Yeah.
Why?
because of the argument I just gave.
No, because it doesn't work. You can't say that a spinning Earth is just the same as a stationary Earth. That doesn't.
No,
that
it's
does
really
not even
simple. It's really simple because you can just say the word relative and then it all makes
Yeah.
sense.
It's
But
like refraction, but it
it
doesn't
does.
work in this case. You can't
But,
even
it's-
look at it and say, oh, well, that would make sense if relativity, like they can say with if refraction, it would make sense. If the magical refraction were always perfect somehow, that could make sense in your head. But this one's an ender, dude. You can't get out of it. And look at it this way: how would the plane always treat every runway the same if it has to deal with a landing with a spin or against a spin? Don't you think there'd be a difference there?
No, because then you've only observed, oh, my speed is a bit higher. Then you decelerate a bit. And then
What about directional change, though? What about that part?
It doesn't
We're talking
matter.
different angles. Well, it
That-
does
it
matter.
doesn't matter which. Wait a minute. It doesn't matter if a wheel is off the ground when it lands that the Earth is moving at a different angle from the alignment of that wheel. Are you kidding me?
It's moving under the airplane. That's the thing.
Hold on, Pagas. Can you drive forward on a road that's going sideways?
Like that's my whole point. The road isn't going sideways when you're
Exactly.
driving, right?
I guess
And
you wanna
that's the
bear with
same thing for
visualize
the
it.
plane. What did you
So
say?
then the air is in the same reference frame as the Earth.
Yeah.
Just look at the
Okay,
GIF
so
that I
then
put
you
in the
don't have a
chat.
Coriolis because you need two reference frames, right?
No.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
you can.
You have the inertial and the non-inertial, and if the air is moving with the Earth, then both are in the same reference frame.
That's the beautiful thing. You can just depending on your problem, you can choose. to look at
Depending on your problem, you can
Yeah.
just choose what to
You-
explain
you
with
choose
relativity, right?
That's the beautiful thing about relativity.
All right, so
Sometimes
explain this to me.
Beautiful.
How do the trade winds and the jet streams work? Because you have at a lower altitude, you have permanent eastward wind, right around the equator. So that's like the opposite direction of the rotation. And then higher up, you have the jet streams, which is from the west, which is the direction of the rotation. So how does that happen? How does one part of the air move in a different direction from the other part of the air that's both moving with the same thing?
as I said earlier, there are other forces which
Like what?
which amplify the wind, like the rotation of the Earth only. To my knowledge, like I'm not
Yeah, but the rotation isn't affecting the air, right? Because the air is moving with it.
I mean,
So then we have the
it's
problem now that
affecting
at the lower altitude, it's moving against that supposed direction. At a higher altitude, it's moving with it, but also not with it because it's moving faster. So
like it's important when you have the stuff as the Coriolis effect when it's different in
right,
in
but
the latitude.
But you keep missing this. You keep missing this because the Coriolis effect requires two reference frames. You have the non-inertial and the inertial. So you can't say the air is moving with the Earth and then claim there are two reference frames. Because the moment you claim the air moves with the Earth, then you have only one reference frame. You get that? If you're on the merry-go-round and the merry-go-round is moving, you're not in a different reference frame.
You have the reference frame of you sitting on the merry-go-round, and then you have the other one observing you.
Yeah, so where can we go outside of it to observe the two reference frames if you claim that the air is with the rotation in one reference frame?
The only time it matters.
Maybe think about that one before you answer.
Well, I don't know. It feels like a bummer to end this discussion now, but the rest of my house is going asleep, so I think we have to continue this another day.
Okay, so if you looked into this and did the math for it and figured out that there's no way that the plane can land safely, then you could put that on your list of reasons that it's impossible that we're not on anything but a stationary Earth, right? Because if the plane can't land, then that's a conversation ender. That's pretty much a decider. You've been in planes before. You don't see the Earth moving separately from it when you land, right?
Yeah.
But necessarily, by your globe model's requirements, the Earth spins separately from the plane, and none of that ever happens.
I think you understood a bit wrong there, but
no, you're not thinking it through. But would you consider that maybe you're not thinking this through, and you're just assuming you know the answer, and you're not really right about it? Would you consider that possibility?
Yeah,
You're not getting it.
If you said earlier, if I get the math and it turns out it doesn't work, it still works out in my end. When I've done the math on this, and
Cool.
like therefore I still believe in it. But if I were to like find some flaw in my calculations, or just like find a proof, clear proof, then the discussion is over and I'm on the other side.
Yeah. Look up non-inertial and inertial reference frames. And then don't just believe whatever the gobbledygook is that they're going to feed you about, oh, it can overtake the spin, but then somehow not account for the spin when it lands. You realize that's a big contradiction, right?
That's not okay. Yeah,
Hey,
but,
check. We're going around in circles with this guy, but anyway, I just posted a Wikipedia article about Coriolis, the guy that came up with the thing. It says he was born in Paris. He's a French guy, right? In 1829, he published a textbook called "Calculation of the Effect of Machines," which presented mechanics in a way that could